Imagine having your deepest pain, the grief of losing a child, meticulously studied and then weaponized against you by the person you loved most. That's exactly what Chloe did, and it almost cost me everything. Our small apartment, usually filled with the comforting hum of our shared life, suddenly felt like a stage for a silent, sinister play. The air was thick with unspoken lies, and I was the unsuspecting lead. I believed her completely when she said those words, those terrifying, wonderful words, because we'd been here before. But I didn't understand then how the first real loss, the one that shattered my world, had taught her the precise blueprint for manipulating me this second time around. To truly grasp the chilling layers of what unfolded, you need to understand that first, devastating chapter, because without it, none of this makes a damn bit of sense. And God, I should have seen it coming. Chloe and I had built a life together for nearly 4 years before that first seismic event. Up until then, our relationship felt solid. Good even. The comfortable kind where you could dream about the future without feeling pressured to race towards it. But she'd always been unequivocally clear about one thing: kids were not in her plan. Not now, not in 5 years, maybe not ever. She hammered that home from day one. She was meticulous with her birth control, swallowing that tiny pill every single morning with her coffee, like a ritual. And if the subject of children ever dared to surface with friends or family, she'd offer a polite, tight smile and a dismissive, "Oh, we're just not there yet." But I always knew what she really meant. The kicker was I did want kids. Always had. I harbored this quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, over time, she'd soften, open up to the idea. But I never pushed. I loved her, and I believed we had all the time in the world. Then, one late September evening, Chloe walked through the door looking utterly drained. She bypassed me, barely a greeting, heading straight for the bathroom and locking herself in. 20 minutes later, she emerged, a small plastic stick clutched in her hand. Her face held an expression I'd never witnessed, a haunting mix of terror and disbelief. And then, she uttered the words that changed everything: "I'm pregnant." I swear, my brain just stopped. For a second, the world went silent. My first reaction? Pure, unadulterated joy. The kind of happiness that makes your chest ache, like it's trying to burst. Instantly, my mind raced. Cribs. Baby names. Imagining telling our families. I was already mentally re-engineering my entire life, creating space for this incredible new person. I asked her how it happened. She mumbled something about work stress, forgetting her pill a couple of times that month. It just slipped her mind. And honestly, I didn't care how it happened. I was just ecstatically thrilled that it did. I started spilling out plans. We should get married. I wanted to do this right. We needed to start looking for a house because our little apartment wouldn't cut it. I remember hearing myself say over and over, "We're going to be amazing parents." Like I was trying to convince us both it was truly happening. But Chloe, she didn't react how I expected. No tears of joy, no laughter, not even a smile. Just a profound exhaustion. She just said, "I need some time to process this," and then, at 7 in the evening, she went to bed. For the next few days, I was practically floating. I devoured baby websites, scoured real estate listings, even called my mom to share the incredible news she was going to be a grandmother. But Chloe was a different person. Distant. Quiet. She moved through our apartment like a ghost. Every time I tried to talk about our baby, she'd give me clipped, one-word answers or just expertly pivot the conversation. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe this was a normal reaction to an unplanned pregnancy. I tried to be understanding, to give her space, but this strange, inexplicable tension began to coil between us, tightening with each passing day. Then, just 2 agonizing weeks after we'd gotten the news, Chloe started bleeding. She initially brushed it off. "Spotting is normal," she said. But it worsened. By nightfall, we were in the emergency room. The doctor performed an ultrasound, and I'll never erase the image of his face, the gentle sorrow as he turned the screen away from us. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft, "but there's no heartbeat." Just like that, it was gone. Chloe had miscarried. We lost our baby. I felt a searing emptiness, like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out every single thing that mattered. I cried in that hospital room. Unashamedly. I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. And when I looked at Chloe, she was crying too. But even in my shattered state, something felt off. It was like she was crying because it was the expected reaction, not because her world had just imploded the way mine had. We drove home in a suffocating silence that night. For weeks, I was an absolute wreck. Work was impossible. Food was flavorless. My mind replayed all the milestones that would never be. First steps, first words, teaching my child to ride a bike. All of it, obliterated before it even began. Chloe seemed sad, yes, but not utterly shattered like I was. And after barely a month, she snapped back to normal. Like it had never happened. Like we hadn't just lost a child. When I tentatively brought up the idea of trying again, someday, she shut me down cold. Liam, she said, I don't think I'm ready for that. When I pressed, asking when she might be, she just shrugged and changed the subject. We'd even discussed marriage before the pregnancy, nothing firm, but it was a quiet understanding. After the miscarriage, I thought perhaps we'd lean into that, a way to heal together. But she insisted we wait, that we both needed time to process. And I agreed, because I was too emotionally decimated to argue about anything. What I couldn't have possibly known then, what only hindsight has illuminated with a horrifying clarity, was this. While I was utterly consumed by grief for a child I had already loved with all my heart, Chloe was watching me, studying me. Every reaction, every raw emotion. She saw how swiftly I was willing to uproot my entire life. How desperately I wanted that house, that marriage, how eager I was to give her anything and everything she could possibly need. All for a baby. And somewhere in the shadowed corners of her mind, during those weeks I was falling apart, a dark realization began to form. She understood, with chilling precision, that a pregnancy, real or not, was the ultimate lever. The key. The absolute, undeniable way to get exactly what she wanted from me. And that if she ever needed to turn that key again, she'd know precisely how. I spent months clawing my way back from that abyss, going to therapy, leaning on friends, doing everything in my power to find some semblance of peace. Chloe, though? She moved on so much faster than I did, almost as if it hadn't touched her at all. Now I understand why. Looking back, everything that came later clicks into place with a sickening thud. While I was genuinely mourning, battling the tidal wave of real grief, she was taking notes. Plotting. Calculating how to weaponize my profound pain against me. The most gut-wrenching part? I never saw it coming. Not until it was almost too late. Not until she'd nearly taken everything, and I'd nearly lost myself. Then, about 7 months after the miscarriage, just as I was finally starting to feel human again, Chloe came to me with news that made my heart seize, in the best and worst possible ways. She said she was pregnant. Again. This time, her face wasn't etched with fear or distance like before. It was serious, almost resolute. Like she'd come to terms with something monumental. My first instinct was a gut-wrenching caution. I couldn't survive that pain again. But then I looked into her eyes, and I thought I saw genuine tears, raw emotion, and all my defenses just crumbled. I allowed myself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, this was our second chance. I asked if she was sure. She nodded, confirming 3 positive tests over the past week. When I asked how it happened, she said she'd been dwelling on our loss, realizing she didn't want to live with regret. So, she'd stopped her birth control months ago, without telling me, because she wanted it to be a surprise. I should have stopped right there. Should have demanded to know why she'd hide something so immense, especially after everything. But instead, I just pulled her into a hug. I told her everything would be different this time. We would be okay. This was our second chance. The next few days were honestly beautiful. We shared the news with our families, who were thrilled, yet understandably nervous given our past heartbreak. Chloe seemed different, too, more engaged, more present. Like she was genuinely excited about motherhood, rather than terrified. But then, the shift began. Subtle at first, then rapidly accelerating. She started talking about the wedding, not in a whimsical, future-gazing way, but with an almost desperate urgency. Like it had to happen immediately, like time was running out. She kept repeating that a baby needed stability, that she needed to feel our commitment was ironclad. When I agreed we should start planning, she pushed for a date within the next 2 months. It felt insanely rushed, but I chalked it up to nesting, that pre-baby anxiety I'd heard about. Then came the house conversation. This is where a cold knot began to form in my gut, a feeling I desperately tried to suppress because I wanted so badly for this to be real, for this to be our perfect ending. We were at the kitchen table one night, scrolling through listings. Chloe kept pointing to these sprawling, 4-bedroom homes with huge yards in outrageously expensive neighborhoods, way beyond our budget. When I gently reminded her of our financial realities, she went quiet for a moment. Then she suggested we use my savings for the down payment. I countered that my savings were for our future, for us. She just smiled. Exactly, she said, it is for our future. But then she added something that made my stomach lurch, a feeling I couldn't quite articulate. She said the house should be in her name, though, just to be safe. When I asked what safe meant, she explained it was protection. If something happened to me, God forbid, she wanted to ensure she and the baby were secure, that she'd have stability no matter what happened between us. I sat there, trying to process it. On the surface, it almost made twisted sense. People plan for worst-case scenarios. But it felt fundamentally wrong. Like she was meticulously planning for a future where I wasn't even a factor, just a disposable wallet. I told her I needed to think about it. She didn't push, just kissed my cheek and said, "Take your time, but we need to decide soon. I'm already 8 weeks along, we should get moving." For the next few weeks, Chloe brought up the house constantly, always cloaked in the guise of protection for her and the baby. Then came the escalating demands. The wedding had to happen before closing on the house, and I needed to add her to my bank accounts for emergencies, so she could access money if something happened to me. I felt this insidious pressure building, like I was being herded into a corner, each conversation a step deeper into a trap I couldn't yet fully see. But every time I dared to voice a flicker of concern, she'd turn on the emotion. "I thought you wanted this family, Liam," she'd weep, or, "After everything, I just need to feel secure." And just like that, the guilt would wash over me, silencing any questions about her true motives. The turning point. It arrived about 3 weeks after she told me she was pregnant. I'd come home early from work one day, having forgotten my laptop on the kitchen counter. As I walked in, I heard Chloe's voice from our bedroom, the door slightly ajar. Her words carried down the hallway. I swear I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then I heard my name, and something in her tone made me freeze. What I heard next made my blood run arctic cold. She was on the phone with her friend, Harper. I heard her say I'd been ready to give her everything last time. The house, the ring, all of it. And then we lost the baby and everything just stopped. All the plans disappeared. There was a muffled pause, Harper's voice inaudible. And then Chloe laughed. An actual, chilling laugh. "This time," she said, "I'm not leaving anything to chance. Once the house is in my name and we're married, I'll figure out the rest." I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. I tried to twist her words, to find any other explanation. But then, she spoke the words that absolutely annihilated everything I thought I knew about her. She told Harper I would never know the truth. And even if things didn't work out between us down the line, at least she'd have the house. At least she'd have something to show for all of this. I quietly, carefully backed out of the apartment, my body numb. I got into my car and sat there for almost an hour, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Trying to find any explanation that didn't confirm the horror I felt. But the pieces, the fragmented, terrifying pieces, started clicking into place with sickening clarity. Her abrupt about-face on having kids, after years of staunch refusal. The manic urgency surrounding the wedding and the house. Her unwavering insistence that everything be in her name. And then, the most chilling realization, she had never shown me a single shred of proof for this pregnancy. Beyond her word. Sitting in that car, it hit me, I'd never seen a doctor's appointment confirmation. never been invited to an ultrasound, never even seen the positive pregnancy tests she claimed to have taken. I just believed her. Because why wouldn't I? After all we'd endured, why would she lie about something so profoundly sacred? That night, I walked back into the apartment and played the part of the devoted boyfriend. Kissed her hello, asked about her day, made dinner. I didn't breathe a word about what I'd overheard. Because before I did anything, I needed to know for sure. I needed undeniable proof I wasn't losing my mind. Over the next few days, my eyes were open. I started noticing things I'd blindly ignored. How Chloe had no morning sickness, even though she claimed to be almost 12 weeks along. How she was still sipping her coffee every morning, something she'd completely given up during the real pregnancy because it made her violently nauseous. How her body hadn't changed at all. Not even a subtle bump. I gently suggested we go to her next doctor's appointment together. She instantly manufactured an excuse. Her doctor was booked for weeks. She'd have to reschedule anyway. When I offered to call the office myself and get me added, she flared up, accusing me of being controlling, needing space for her own medical care. That was it. In that moment, I knew. With absolute, sickening certainty, there was no baby. Chloe had watched. She'd watched my utter desperation during the first pregnancy, my willingness to give her everything she wanted. And she'd decided to turn it into a weapon. She'd observed my grief, cataloged every reaction, and meticulously crafted a detailed blueprint to get precisely what she desired: a house in her name, financial security, a wedding, all on her terms, all with my money, and with zero intention of ever bringing a child into this world. The lie itself? That was awful. But the worst part was the realization that the woman I'd loved and trusted for 4 years had taken my deepest pain, my genuine devastation over losing our child, and coldly calculated, this is how I get what I want. This is the key to everything. I felt physically sick, betrayed to my core. But more than anything, I felt stupid. So incredibly stupid for not seeing it sooner. For being so desperate to believe in a fairy tale, so eager for a second chance at fatherhood that I'd willfully ignored every single crimson flag waving frantically in front of my face. Now I had a choice. I could confront her immediately, watch her scramble for pathetic excuses. Or I could play along. Let her believe her meticulously crafted plan was unfolding flawlessly. I wanted to see exactly how far she would push this monstrous lie. How deep the betrayal truly ran. And, honestly, after what she'd done, after twisting the worst moment of my life into a weapon, I wanted to watch her walk right up to the edge before I ripped the ground out from under her. So, I made my decision. I let Chloe believe her scheme was working perfectly. For the next 2 weeks, I became the most excited future father you could imagine. I'd ask about baby names, show her house listings, even suggest we go nursery shopping on the weekends. And the whole time, I watched her lie straight to my face, with a sickening smile. The thing about knowing the truth? It alters everything. Every time Chloe placed a hand on her stomach, talking about the baby growing. Every elaborate tale about morning sickness or bizarre cravings. I saw right through it. And what truly shocked me wasn't just that she was lying, but how good she was at it. How effortlessly, how naturally the lies flowed from her, as if she'd been rehearsing them her entire life. I started documenting everything in secret. Detailed notes on my phone, every conversation, every refusal to let me attend a doctor's appointment, every glaring inconsistency in her story. I knew that when this inevitably blew up, I needed concrete proof. Proof I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't just paranoia or cold feet. One night, about a week before our scheduled meeting with Arthur, the real estate agent Chloe had sourced, she brought out the house paperwork. "We need to get pre-approved for a mortgage," she chirped, adding she'd already filled out most of the application with her information, to save us time. She showed me the papers. And there it was, glaring. She'd listed herself as the sole owner on the title, and me as a co-borrower on the mortgage. Meaning, legally, I'd be on the hook for payments on a house I wouldn't actually own. When I pointed this out, she had an explanation instantly ready. Better for tax purposes, some vague financial reason she couldn't quite articulate. I just told her, sounds fine. I'll sign whatever you need. The wave of relief that flooded her face was almost pathetic. She'd expected a fight and was utterly delighted I was still playing along. Of course, I had zero intention of signing a single thing. But I wanted to see. I wanted to watch her sprint towards that finish line before I revealed it was all a cruel illusion. A few days later, Chloe suggested we meet with Arthur to iron out timelines and options. I agreed instantly, even offered to take the afternoon off work so we could go together. That seemed to make her genuinely ecstatic, like all her machinations were finally coalescing. The morning of the meeting, I went to my bank. I didn't touch any money, didn't want to tip her off, but I needed to understand what would happen if Chloe, by some miracle, gained access to my savings. The banker unequivocally assured me, without my explicit, written consent and signature, she couldn't touch a single dollar. A small, much-needed flicker of peace in the storm. When I arrived at Arthur's office that afternoon, Chloe was already there. She sat in the waiting area, a bulging folder of printouts, notes, and paint samples clutched in her hands. She looked more exhilarated than I'd seen her in months. This was it. This was the pinnacle she'd been striving for, the moment of her triumphant win. We sat down with Arthur. He began to walk us through the labyrinthine process: down payments, interest rates, closing costs. Chloe nodded along, feigning perfect comprehension, occasionally squeezing my hand, playing the part of our united front. Then Arthur asked about our timeline. Chloe didn't hesitate, as fast as possible. We're expecting a baby. We need to be settled before the due date. I watched Arthur's face light up with congratulations. And I sat there, feeling nothing but a chilling, absolute clarity. After about 30 minutes, Arthur excused himself to print some documents from the back office. The moment the door clicked shut, I turned to Chloe. I need to show you something, I said, my voice dangerously calm, before we go any further with this. Her expression flickered from confused to curious, then a slight, nervous tremor. I pulled out my phone. But instead of the voice recording she might have braced herself for, I opened a folder filled with screenshots I'd meticulously collected over the past week. You see, after I'd overheard that phone call with Harper, I'd waited for Chloe to leave the apartment. Then, I'd gone to her laptop, the one she always left open on the kitchen table. And I found everything. The messages between her and Harper, meticulously detailing their scheme. Conversations about how to handle me, how to keep me convinced. Even a draft text she'd never sent, where she joked about how easy it was to manipulate someone who actually wanted to be a father. I'd screenshot every single damning message, backed it all up to my cloud. And now I showed it all to her, slowly scrolling through message after message, watching the color drain from her face as her confusion morphed into sickening pallor, then into absolute horror. The color drained from Chloe's face so rapidly, I genuinely thought she might pass out right there in Arthur's office. For a solid 10 seconds, she just sat there, utterly silent, staring at my phone as if it were a gun pointed directly at her chest, watching her entire world implode. Then she tried to speak. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, she stammered, "You're taking it out of context." Harper was giving me bad advice. I was just venting to a friend. I didn't mean any of it the way it looks in text form. I let her talk. Let her stumble through pathetic excuse after pathetic excuse, watching her desperately try to stitch together some alternate reality where she wasn't the villain. When she finally fell silent, I asked her one simple question. One I already knew the answer to. "Are you actually pregnant, Chloe?" She looked at me, wide, desperate eyes, and indignantly declared, "Of course I am. How dare you even ask me that? How dare you question something so serious?" I met her gaze, cold and unwavering. "Then prove it. Right now. Call your doctor. Have them send over the ultrasound photos. Show me any medical documentation at all. Anything that proves this is real." Her face finally completely crumbled. The tears started then. Real tears this time. "I did it," she sobbed, "because you wouldn't commit otherwise, Liam. I was scared of losing everything." And in that moment, it hit me. In her twisted mind, she had actually justified this to herself. Convinced herself that manipulating me was necessary, reasonable. That fabricating a pregnancy was just a clever tool to get what she deserved. I stood up. Arthur, who had just walked back in looking utterly bewildered and uncomfortable, glanced between us. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor inside, "we won't be needing your services after all. There's been a misunderstanding. We need to leave." Chloe lunged, grabbing my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, Liam, please don't do this. Don't throw away our future over what she called a misunderstanding." I looked at her. Really looked at this person I'd spent 4 years of my life with. This woman I'd been ready to marry, to build a family with. "I lost a child, Chloe," I said, each word heavy with grief and disgust. "I mourned a baby that I loved. And you saw that as an opportunity." She tried to argue, claiming her grief was just as real as mine, that she'd lost a baby too. But we both knew the brutal truth. Her grief had dissipated in a month. Mine had nearly obliterated me for half a year. I walked out of that office. Chloe followed, practically clinging to my heels in the parking lot, still sobbing, still pleading. "We can work through this. Couples therapy. I'll do anything, Liam, just give me another chance." I got into my car. She stood at the driver's side window, pounding lightly, telling me I was throwing away our future, that everything she'd done was because she loved me, because she wanted security for us. I rolled down the window, just a crack. "There is no future anymore, Chloe," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Not for us. I refuse to build a life on top of a lie this massive, this calculated." She asked where I was going. "I'm going home," I told her, "to pack your things. You have until the end of the week to find somewhere else to stay." The look on her face then, pure, unadulterated shock. She genuinely believed that, even after being caught red-handed, I'd just forgive her. That we'd move on as if nothing had happened. For the next few days, Chloe tried absolutely everything. Constant calls, incessant texts, showing up at my apartment at ungodly hours. She even dragged her mom into it, who called to lecture me about being too harsh, about young couples making mistakes, and how I should be more forgiving. But I didn't budge. Not an inch. The truth is, I could probably forgive a lot of things. People lie. People mess up. But not this. Never this. Not using the absolute worst pain of my life as a blueprint for manipulation. Not faking a pregnancy and undoubtedly planning to fake another miscarriage, all to secure a house and a wedding ring. About a week after everything imploded, I got a text from Harper, Chloe's friend. She apologized for her part, claiming she'd warned Chloe from the start that the plan was wrong, that it would blow up in her face. But Chloe, Harper said, had insisted I'd never find out. I was too trusting, too desperate to be a father, to ever question her. I didn't respond to Harper. Honestly, at that point, I didn't care about apologies or explanations. My furious anger had coalesced into something far colder, far clearer, a profound, bone-deep understanding that I had just dodged an absolute catastrophe. I spent the next few months rebuilding my life for the second time in a year. But this time, it was different. I wasn't mourning a child. I was mourning the person I thought Chloe was. Accepting that she had never truly existed. That the woman I'd loved was, in large part, a calculated fiction. Looking back now, I am profoundly, terrifyingly grateful I overheard that phone call with Harper. Grateful I went through her messages. Grateful I didn't sign those papers. Because if I hadn't, I'd probably be sitting in a house I didn't own, married to someone who viewed me as nothing more than a means to an end. I would have been wondering why I felt so utterly empty, so completely trapped. And the scariest part? I would have never known why. I would have wasted years trying to fix something that was broken from the very, very beginning. After hearing all this, I have to ask, what would have been your breaking point? Or have you ever faced a betrayal that was this calculated? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found yourself hooked, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life stories like mine.